Sorry, I'm slightly late. Uh, there was some technical problem in my because I never use Facebook actually. I'm using first time this Facebook. So I'm slightly late. I'm very sorry because as I told you, I never used Facebook. This is first time I use Zoom and Skype and all other things, but not the Facebook. Uh, but anyway, thank you very much. I'm getting so many comments, and I am really thankful to Ashish Khandelwal from Indian Agriculture Students Association who were asking me again to say something. I said, okay, I will speak something on wheat. So this is the right time, friends, to understand the value of wheat. Normally, we understand the value of wheat by going to a restaurant, going to a dhaba, going to a hotel, going to your kitchen, going anywhere. Morning, evening, afternoon, go anywhere, whether it is Banaras Hindu University or IRI Delhi, what you eat. You eat in the morning, you eat bread, or you want to have a samosa, or you want to have some biscuits, or you want to have some noodles, or cake, paratha, or something. What is this? This is all wheat. So, wheat is a way of life. Wheat provides 20% calorie to the whole world. And about 2.5 billion people from 89 countries, they depend on wheat as a staple crop. And this is the right time to understand the value of wheat. Because of this COVID-19 threat, Government of India announced that it will give free ration to 80 crore people. Now, what is this free ration? This is all wheat and rice which is in our buffer stock. Now, people often criticize buffer stock. We are keeping huge stocks, which is a wastage, and it's getting damaged. No, we have been proved completely wrong. This buffer stock is absolutely necessary for national security. Now, if you want to import wheat right now, you cannot. Where is the wheat? Where is the rice? About 60 to 70% of wheat and rice is in the buffer stock of two countries, that is China and India. Even if you have money, you will not get wheat. So you have to have these huge stocks, and that's why government of India is in a strong position to provide free ration to large number of people who are facing problem because of this COVID-19. Now, you know the history of wheat. It's a very old crop. There are human settlements. There is record of human settlements and pits 8 to 10,000 years ago where wheat was found. Even in museum, you go to British Museum in UK, you will find that actual loaves they have preserved, which are 5,000 years old, which were baked in Egypt. So wheat is very old crop, and Egyptians were the first to produce the raisin loaves using yeast because wheat is a beautiful crop having gluten. When there is a yeast, it will make a puff. It will become a bread or a paratha or a good chapati. So first time it was, the history says, the Egyptians learned how to use yeast to make a bread in the oven. And even in their model granaries, they used to keep food in the tomb to provide food in the afterlife. They used to believe in the afterlife. Now, historical facts, there are large number of historical facts. You must have heard about Thomas Robert Malthus. He forecasted a population crash, 1798. He made a calculation. He said that the world will perish, half of the people will die. Because his calculation was that it was impossible to improve wheat yields as fast as people made babies. So you are producing babies, but you are not producing enough wheat. So you cannot survive. But thanks to the power of science, green revolution happened. In India, in 60s, our Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri had to request Please eat wheat only once in a day. Eat once in a day. Now, nobody can say this now. But he had to say because there were no wheat. And we were getting wheat from, because United States was the only country having surplus wheat. So we were getting that time from United States, but then Green Revolution occurred in 1960s because of a gene or a variety called Norin 10, not gene, variety. Norin 10, the donor of dwarfing gene, saved millions of lives. It was the work of Dr. Norman Borlaug. Actually, Norin 10 is a variety which was released in Japan in 1935 by a scientist Gonjiro Inazuka. And then it was taken to United States by a scientist in the US Army, occupational army, Salman, who took it to USA and gave to Professor Vogel. Professor Vogel converted this in winter wheat in 1953 into dwarf wheat. And those lines were used by Dr. Borlaug to produce dwarf varieties in spring wheat, and those were given to the whole world, including India, Pakistan, Turkey, and many countries where population was growing, but there was not enough food, and Green Revolution happened. But Dr. Borlaug did not forget Gonjiro Inazuka. He said to him, "If I had not had your splendid Norin 10, my research would have never been possible." See, this is the beauty of great people. So he was thanking that Japanese scientist who produced Norin 10, which was in Japan. Nobody knew about that. But Dr. Borlaug used that in crossing program after taking from Dr. Vogel and produced large number of varieties which created Green Revolution. But you will be surprised to know that first variety produced by Dr. Borlaug was not a dwarf variety. It was tall variety. Its name was Yaqui 50 because he released this variety in Mexico in 1950. It was rust resistant variety. It had no disease. But after that, he produced a series of dwarf varieties, and then they came to India, Pakistan, and Green Revolution happened. And many people in the world remember the contribution of wheat in different ways. For example, if you go to Turkmenistan, Ashgabat, in 2005, they made a white wheat museum. There is a museum, a building in the shape of, almost in the shape of a wheat plant. I mean, it's a building, but on the top of that, you can see a wheat spike, and it was established to relay the historical story of white wheat of Turkmenistan to future generations, telling to people that how we survived because of this wheat. And this white wheat museum, they say, is a graceful sign of respect to the history of civilization. So the history of civilization in many countries is connected to the history of the science of wheat research. Now, if you see currently what are the trends in wheat demand and production? Well, if you see wheat demand and projection, population is increasing, so demand is increasing. There is a prediction made by FAO Global Perspective Studies based upon a UN data of 2015. They say that to match the demand of food in 2050, the world needs 50% more wheat. But sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia needs 112% more wheat, and rest of the world 34% wheat. So still we need a lot of wheat because population is increasing and people want to eat more wheat also. I mean, if income goes up, they want to eat more. Of course, this COVID-19 is creating a problem, but we believe that this problem can be overcome shortly, and we will back to normal business. But what is interesting is wheat yields have stagnated in Northwest Europe. If you go to Northwest Europe, any developed country, you will find that about 10 years ago, even before that, yields are not increasing. Their productivity is around 10 to 12 tons per hectare maximum, but yields are increasing in countries like India and China. This is a good news because our average yields are still lower and they are increasing at the rate of around 1% per year or slightly higher. But you will be, I think you must be knowing about it. There is one country which had to stop wheat production in 2016, and that was Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia became first country in the world to stop wheat production in 2016 because there is no water. They had very limited water. So after producing wheat from 1960, 92, 2000, and their peak came around 1992, then 2004 also they were producing, a good amount of wheat, but they stopped in 2016 and they are dependent on the import of it for their people. So you can understand if there is no water, there are no resources, many countries may stop production. So other countries have to increase production. Therefore, a country like India is supposed to be self reliant. We cannot depend on global supply. So we must keep on doing research. We must keep on helping farmers, extension workers, make good policy and continue. No, why? Because there are a number of challenges. Global warming, climate change. Some people say, yes, it is coming. Some people say, no, no, it's not a big problem, but it's a problem. So when temperature is going up, wheat is a winter crop. It's not a rice crop. It loves cool temperature. So this will be a problem. And when climate is changing, then water is another problem. Already, India is a hot spot of climate change. Pre-monsoon groundwater levels are going down every year. You cannot pump anymore. You have to find out other ways. We are surrounded by enemies. Enemies are diseases. One disease in human, COVID-19, created so much problem. So wheat has so many problems: insects, pests, diseases, rust, blight, smuts. Always surrounded. We think that only we can become sick. Plant can also become sick. And there are transboundary pathogens. Now, this COVID-19 came from China. It came how it came. It was flying in the flight. Any airline you can say. But there are diseases which don't need passport, like rust. They don't see national boundaries. They fly like drone through trade winds. They can come clinging on your shoes, clinging on your socks, clinging on your shirt. You will never know. Otherwise, they come by trade winds. So they are transboundary pathogens, very dangerous. And recently, there is wheat blast in Bangladesh. It came from Brazil to Bangladesh. It took about 25 years to travel from Brazil to Bangladesh. It is already in your border. Likewise, malnutrition. You need nutrition. You need wheat, which has more protein. It has more minerals, more zinc, more iron, because malnutrition is a problem. And then when most of the people are coming to cities, the food habits are changing. Now, if you go to South, you go to your friend's house, he will offer you puri sabji. And when he will come, you want him to enjoy, a dosa. So, this food is changing. So, because of urbanization, the food habits are changing. And, the demand of a range of products, bread. There are different types of breads. 20 years ago, there was only one bread, white bread. Now he will say, sir, you want white bread, maida bread, or you want atta bread, or you want, another bread, coarse bread, this bread, that bread. Likewise, cookies. So food habits are also changing. So there will be much more focus in quality due to variable consumer demand and prospect of export also. Because Durham wheat has a very bright export market. Even this estimum wheat has a market, provided you are competitive in terms of the price. Now I will give you some recent examples where research has been successful, although very challenging. For example, if you ask how we breed for terminal heat tolerance. Now this year we were lucky in India, March was very cool. Normally March becomes very hot. But this terminal heat tolerance creates problem for wheat and wheat production goes down. So how we breed for this terminal heat tolerance? Very simple. We delay our planting time. When we delay our planting time, because in CIMIT, as I know, we delay our planting time as late as 20th of February. So normal wheat we plant in November, and by the time this wheat is almost, in milk stage, we plant another, set of same breeding material so that it is exposed to 40 degree centigrade temperature when it is after tillering stage. And by this we pick up good lines and then we make crosses and then we start do reselection. So this is done again and again and again and again and again. And this is how we identify good donor lines. This is how we identify good genes in that. Of course genetics is, I will not go into detail of those things. Then you will say molecular mapping, finding this gene, that gene, genomic selection, so many things. And there are very good examples in the world. For example, I will give you an interesting example of Yaqui Valley of Mexico. It is in Sonora state. One variety, Cirno, was produced in 2012. Now, within 2 years, this variety occupied 95% of the whole valley because it was very dwarf, normal looking variety, but was giving 15% higher yield than all other varieties. Now, after 2012, in next 5 years, temperature went up. So production of all varieties went down. Cirno also suffered, but still it was higher than all other wheat varieties because it had heat tolerance. So if you have heat tolerance, still farmer can get good yield compared to other varieties. Now in India, there are a large number of varieties recently have been produced. For example, recently a variety has been released by Indian Institute of Wheat and Barley Research that is called DBW187. Now, this variety is very interesting. It has been released for northeastern Gangetic Plain, UP Bihar, eastern UP Bihar, and also released for Punjab, Haryana. So it has early heat tolerance as well as late heat tolerance. Now you will ask, what is this early heat tolerance? Early heat tolerance means when you plant in October, your wheat will not be successful. So this we were observing for a long time that wheat is generally planted only in November. Generally after 5th of November. But in Punjab, some farmers used to plant in the start of November, sometime in the end of October also. Then we thought if we can plant wheat around 20th, between 20 to 25 of October, can it be successful? So we had no idea from where this early heat tolerance will come. So we screened large number of varieties in India, 3,000, 4,000 varieties in India and other countries in October sowing, and then we found there are good donor lines. And then we made crosses and produced some lines, and we found that if farmers can plant in October, about 10 days before the end of October, that is between 20 to 25 October, without doing anything, yield increases around 10 quintals per hectare. Average, when we tested 540 lines in large scale trial in 3 locations, in 2 years, we found the average yield increase was 0.8 ton per hectare with same amount of fertilizer application, same amount of weedicide, but less water. Why less water? Because when you plant early, the soil is already wet because of the monsoon. You need not give pre-sowing irrigation. And when you combine this with the conservation agriculture, direct seeding after rice harvest, you save water, you escape wheat from terminal heat because it will mature early. So by the time temperature will go up by middle March or end of March, crop is already mature, and it will promote mechanization for early planting, which will avoid straw burning. Because when you are harvesting rice with combine, immediately you can plant wheat using a good machine like Happy Seeder. So you are not burning your rice straw, you are using conservation agriculture, you are getting more yield, you are saving water, and there are varieties. Now, this was not possible earlier because there were no good varieties which can be planted in around 20 to 25th of October. Now, if you go to Punjab, Haryana, and talk to people, you will find that adoption of early sowing is now around 15 to 20%. The government of Punjab informed us this year in 2019 that early sowing was about 17%. But when we did remote sensing estimates indicated 22% wheat area under conservation agriculture and early sowing. So this is a very good sign. It helps in various ways. Now I will tell you another case study. I was talking about nutrition. Now nutrition, nutrition, you all know the problem of nutrition. Now there is a very interesting trait, this mineral, zinc. Now there was no zinc deficiency in India about 20 years ago. But now there is zinc deficiency. The first zinc conference by medical people was organized in 2005. And to my knowledge, it was organized in Banaras Hindu University. They declared that zinc deficiency is very common and we must address by giving pill of zinc or by any other alternative. Then agriculture and medical came together, and many people, and they created a project called Harvest Plus, in which they started breeding for zinc rich wheat varieties. Now this was initially for 5 crops, then became for 10 crops, but in wheat it was for zinc. And the objective was that all traits will be like normal, everything normal, but zinc will be about 30% more than the normal wheat. Now, that time, when zinc was tested in about 5,000 germplasm, including cultivated lines, it was found that zinc is not more than 30 ppm. 30 ppm, it was not more than that. So then a strategy was made, can we increase 30%? So either you eat 30% more chapati, or you eat same amount of chapati with 30% more zinc. Now, because you cannot eat more chapati, this idea of increasing zinc by 30% was a good idea. Now, many people said that this is not possible because you cannot increase. If you will increase zinc content in the grain, you will lose something. Either yield will go down or protein will go down or something will happen. So 5 years it took to find out where are the donors. And after lot of germplasm screening, it was found that wild relative species are good donors of zinc. It is not present in common wheat varieties. It was present in dicocoets. It was present in monococcum. It was present in Triticum spelta. It was present in land races from Iran and Mexico. So a crossing program was initiated, and many people said this can never be achieved. But we believe that if there is proper investment by donors, it can be achieved. And within 10 years, from genetic resources, finding where we can find high zinc in the grain of wheat donors, where several varieties have been released in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal. This is the power of science. Now, these varieties are like normal varieties. They have higher yield, they have higher resistance, they have very good chapati quality, they have very good protein content plus zinc. So, as some people, I remember Dr. Mangla Rai, the Director General of ICR and Secretary there, used to say, superior in one and inferior in none. So it is inferior in no trait and it is superior in grain zinc. And when it is given, it will be eaten by, consumed by people. Definitely it will help. And zinc is very important. You know why zinc is important? Because in our body system, the physiological processes, zinc is present about 10 times of other elements. Compared to iron also, it is present 10 times. So it is used everywhere. If there is zinc deficiency, there are so many problems. First thing will be the vigor will be low, then IQ will be low, the overall performance will be low, and immunity will be low. So it's a successful story. Now, another example. Another example is when a new race of stem rust came in Uganda in 1999. It was called UG99. Now, it is just like a race of this virus COVID-19 came in China. Suppose it is unable to travel. Suppose it is not going anywhere. Suppose all preventive measures have been taken very strong, so this disease will not spread or would not have spread. But it did. So in UG99, when UG99 came, it was found that 90% of the world wheat varieties were susceptible to this race. So breeding was started, and at the same time, UG99 also started spreading by wind, because you all know that many of the rust new virulences, they come from Africa. Now, Africa, what is interesting is, for example, Kenya. If you have been to Kenya, Kenya is a country where wheat is grown whole year. Area is not very big, but wheat you can plant in January, February, March, April, anywhere. January, February, March, April, June, July, August, December, anytime. So whenever you go to farmer's field, you will find a wheat either being planted or being harvested or being irrigated. So when wheat is present throughout the year, it's an ideal source for rust to multiply and produce variation. They do their own breeding. They have their own breeding program. So this rust has capacity to breed new races, and then they fly like drone. So in 1999, when UG99 was discovered, people said it will not move, but it started moving. Suddenly, by 2005, it spread to 3 countries. Then in 8, it spread further, 10 further, and 16, it came to Iran. So it traveled up to Iran. So by this time, we got about 10 years time, because the initiative of breeding for UG99 started in about 2005. That was Borlaug Global Rust Initiative. So within 10 years, hundreds of varieties were produced, and they were distributed around the world, including India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Ethiopia, Kenya, Sudan, Egypt, Iran, everywhere. So when there were resistant varieties, this rust stopped, this pathogen stopped, and still it is in a stopped condition. So we believe that it will continue to stop. Maybe after some time it will produce a new race, and it is producing. Like yellow rust is now producing a new rust. This yellow rust requires cooler temperature. It is present only cooler, for example, beyond Punjab, Afghanistan, Pakistan, hills of Nepal, and other parts of the world. But recently we are finding that yellow rust has developed a new race which can occur in warmer areas like UP Bihar, like Bangladesh, Indore, anywhere. So we have to be careful, and we have to do breeding for this. Now, how we did breeding for UG99? Because UG99 was present only in Uganda, then went to Kenya. So thanks to the Kenyan government, they allowed us to create a facility, a breeding program facility for testing for this disease, because this disease was present only there. Now, wheat breeders from 70 countries used to come, plant their material there, and then identify the resistant sources, resistant varieties. And that is how one country, Kenya, in collaboration with some international collaboration, of course, all countries collaborated, including CIMMYT, of course, Cornell, and they helped in identification of UG19 resistant lines, and the world is safe from this disease. Now, wheat blast. Now, I told you about wheat blast. Wheat blast has come in South Asia. It came to Bangladesh in 2016. It was reported in Brazil in 1985. People thought it is in Latin America. It can never travel to South Asia, although Smith, Dr. Dubin in 1985 wrote that this beast will bite the world one day. Please invest, but nobody invested. Latin America, they have a low population, they have enough food, different crops. So they did investment, but not very high investment. Now suddenly this disease came to Bangladesh in 2016. And now see international collaborator how it can help in breeding for this disease. Now, the moment Bangladesh government announced there is a disease like wheat blast in March 2016, immediately samples were collected by CIMIT. They were sent to international laboratories. Pathological tests were done side by side, and also, genome sequencing was done within 3 months. Within a month, it was declared that yes, this is wheat blast. This is the race number this, and within 3 months, we collected wheat material from India, Nepal, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and carried to Bolivia and did testing there. And within 6 months, we provided results to our colleagues in different countries. Say these are your resistant material, and you will be surprised or will be happy to know that within 3 years, about a dozen wheat blast resistant lines have been released in India, Nepal, Bangladesh. So first country was Bangladesh where it was released. Why it was released? Because already there was a breeding program, strong breeding program, collaborative was existing. And those lines were taken to Bolivia where there was wheat blast, and we could identify these are the best lines. They have high yield, they have high resistance to everything, and it was released. This is an excellent example of international collaboration. And many of you must be aware of the fact that India government declared wheat holiday in India in West Bengal. India declared wheat holiday that from Bangladesh border up to 5 kilometer border area in 5 districts. They started with 2 districts, Nadia and Murshidabad, that you cannot grow wheat because then wheat will catch up wheat blast from Bangladesh and then it will spread to the whole country. But the best remedy for all these things is nothing but resistant varieties, and thank God we are successful in breeding resistant varieties. And DBW 187, which I mentioned earlier, is one of those varieties, and these varieties are being multiplied now in the Eastern Gangetic Plains, starting from West Bengal to Bihar to UP, so that wheat blast cannot move further. Because wheat blast right now is not in India, but suppose it comes, it is still only in Bangladesh. Luckily, wheat blast is not in India. Wheat blast is only in Bangladesh, but you never know what will happen tomorrow. So before it comes, you are already prepared that if it comes, we have resistant varieties. And there has been modeling studies done. A model studies published in PLOS 1 says that this Bangladesh environment, hot, humid, matches with a big portion of India, and wheat blast can spread to about 6.5 million hectares in India. It has potential to infect wheat in 6.5 million hectares. So even if it infects 10% area, maybe 10 years from now, 5 years from now, you never know. It is just like another disease like COVID-19. So now we have to prepare for next race of COVID-19. So we have to be prepared for all these new races, all these new diseases, and we are successful because of excellent networking, good science, collaboration, and investment. We need donors. Thanks to Australian agency which invested project on breeding for wheat blast resistant varieties, and also USAID helped in Bangladesh. India government invested thanks to ICR. They are investing a lot of money, and also Ministry of Agriculture. Now, what is a weak point in wheat blast resistance is that this current resistance is only from one source, which is called 2NS, which is the gene is coming from Aegilops ventricosa. Now, if this resistance will break down, then there will be problems. So now we are searching non to NS resistance, and there are indications that we will be successful. Now, how we top up knowledge, this is one thing, only breeding. But, for topping up knowledge, we have to do, pre-breeding also. So about in CIMIT, at least I can tell, and other countries also, more than 100,000 wheat genetic resources have been screened under different stresses. For example, heat stress in Mexico. So we do large scale screening of land races and germplasm collections. Then we find out what is the best pre-breeding material, and then we give to breeders, and they start doing breeding. And now molecules are coming. For example, genomic selection. Earlier, people used to say use marker assisted selection. Find out a marker for a gene, for a trait, but there are large number of traits. Now, stem rust, there may be 40 genes. So you need 40 markers. Yellow rust, you have 40 genes. You again need 40 markers. You need genes for, resistance to drought, resistance to heat, then quality. So marker has some limitation that you can use them, but for a specific purpose and generally for pre-breeding purpose. If you want to use it for breeding, it will take long time, big effort. So genomic selection is has been introduced, in which a sequencing is done, and we try to select based on whole genome performance. And the genotyping by sequencing, a student from genetics must be knowing about it. I'm not going in detail of that. Now we are finding that genomic selection is can be useful. We can monitor increase in favorable alleles over years. By this technique, we can monitor where are favorable alleles, how many genes are really good genes, whether we are improving in our breeding populations, 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, are we increasing favorable alleles? Yes, we can do that. We can also, find out whether our current yield testing strategies are efficient in increasing favorable allele frequencies for grain yield. Yes, using the molecular methods, genomic selection, we can. We have found that there is a linear trend. There is a good correlation in the relationship between the number of favorable alleles in a line and the grain yield. So good lines have more favorable alleles. So I want to tell you that even molecular tools, they are very interesting molecular tools which are helping the whole effort in a nice manner. But overall, what will be the way forward? The way forward is only breeding is not enough. So I am a wheat breeder, so I am speaking about wheat breeding. Very good. You need pre-breeding, so you need genetic diversity. You have to conserve and use diverse wheat collections from your global collections. You have to unlock genetic potential. You have to find out where is the gene. Then you have to do breeding, develop and improve access to varieties, produce and give to farmers. If you are producing, it is not going to farmers, it has no meaning. Then farming system. Crop management is extremely important. Don't forget mechanization. Don't forget participatory research. Talk to farmers. Don't our approach should not be top to bottom. It should be bottom up. Talk to farmers. What do you want? Sir, how can I help you? And then you need, because you are using, now we are using drone for phenotyping. Drones are fitted with camera, we take data, and there are large number of data coming. So there is big data, so we need good statistics, big data analytics, we need artificial intelligence, we need foresight, impact assessment. Socioeconomics are extremely important. You need to have good policy. For example, right now you want to have a good policy. You are in a lockup situation. What policy you want after 1 month, after 2 months, after 3 months? That's why socioeconomics is also extremely important everywhere. And capacity development and partnership. We have to train people in seed production. We have to train people in molecular breeding. We have to train people in artificial intelligence. We have to train people in modeling, in remote sensing. So many things we need. We need an integrated approach. But and also, not bad, I want to tell you, give you a word of caution. What is this word of caution? Everybody has, anti-group. Everybody suffers from politics. Wheat also suffers from politics. Now, the director of Global Wheat Program, Hans Brown, was once telling me, Joshi, wheat is 80% politics. I said, Hans, what is this politics? He said, everybody is running for funding. Everybody is running for, making big impact, telling people, I am the best researcher in this field. I am producing best toothpaste. I am producing best broccoli. I am producing best samosa. So likewise, we need a campaign for wheat. But there are anti people. You will see that there are anti wheat fads. There are 73 million Google hits to a one segment which says why wheat is bad for you. Somebody wrote wheat is bad for you. Now everybody started hitting wheat is bad. It will create problem. There is gluten, so there is allergy. So our small intestine has a problem. So our intestine has a problem. Oh, don't eat wheat; it will increase diabetes. But my dear friends, colleagues, you all are very respected. You are knowledgeable. You all know nutrition is a science. It is not an opinion. Don't make any opinion. You ask for proof. Where is the proof? For example, few days ago, people were saying don't use mask. Now they are saying no, please use mask. Then they will say no, different mask. So nutrition is a science, not an opinion. Don't believe those people. And to do that, CIMIT published a series on carbohydrate, wheat, grains, and health. A number of publications, 13 scientific publications about wheat and all health topics were published about digestion disorders, obesity, cancer, mental diseases, etc., etc. And we concluded, and not only we, the global scientists concluded that wheat is a perfectly safe and healthy crop for everyone. Only very little, about 1% or less than. In India, it is decimal, point 1 or point 2, point 3. But in some countries, there may 1% people who have gluten allergy. Now, there are people who have milk allergy. There are people who have egg allergy. There are people who cannot eat, maybe tea or coffee or something, maybe chicken or maybe some vegetable. Some people cannot eat beans, because they become gas. Oh, I cannot eat in the night. If you give me a huge dal, then I will be, in problem. So many people are like this. So allergy is 1% is okay. So consumption of an optimal mix of whole and refined grain is associated with a number of health benefits, including lower risk of you will still slim and trim. If you eat wheat, you will be strong like Punjab and Haryana people. You will have reduced hypertension. You will reduce your diabetes. And the nutrients and phytonutrients in whole and enriched grains can help counter oxidative stress. There are antioxidants present in wheat. So they counter oxidative stress, inflammation that occur because of aging. So there are anti-aging things also and contribute to many neurological diseases. You can prevent all those neurological diseases because wheat is such a magical crop. And some people wheat can cause Alzheimer and Parkinson. No. There is no such study. Don't believe on all those things and believe on science. And wheat grain has excellent fiber. It has 12% protein. Its fiber improves cardiometabolic health, coronary events and stroke it reduces, hypertension it reduces, type 2 disease, diabetes it reduces, it improves colon rectal health, it improves the health of your intestine, reduces risk of colon and rectal cancer. So where is the fiber? It is mainly located in wheat bran, but very significant amount is present also in the endosperm. So in several countries, white flour provides 40% of the total dietary fiber consumption. So wheat is a beautiful crop for you. You continue to enjoy this. And if you want to know about wheat wisdoms, I want to conclude here. Wheat wisdoms. Now 400 years before Christ, Socrates, Sukrat, Hindi भी से सुकरात कहते हैं, 400 years ago, he said, no man qualifies as a statesman who is entirely ignorant of the problems of wheat. So Socrates used to say wheat is so important. So you cannot be a statesman if you don't know problems of wheat. And our Rashtrapita Mahatma Gandhi said, to a hungry person, God appears in the form of bread. So to hungry person, what you are distributing right now, you are distributing a lot of puris and roti and all those things to people. Of course, rice also. I'm not saying. So this is if you remember Benjamin Franklin, the Benjamin Franklin, United States of America, he said, where there is no law, there is no bread. So I mean, it is called wheat wisdom. In Russia, they say if there is a table without bread, then it is not a table, it's just a board. You need bread to call it a table. So wheat has, wheat wisdom is very interesting. And I believe you all believe on what I'm saying. Of course, don't believe everything, believe on science. So I want to conclude in the end by telling to you all know about it, that there is substantial progress in sustaining wheat production and productivity. Very good research is going on globally, but challenges are equally threatening. There is no time, to take rest. Our efforts must continue, and we should continue to invest, work, produce good scientists. And this is all. And I thank all the audience. I don't know how many are, some of them are sending me messages. They are very knowledgeable colleagues. And also to all donors who gave money to us or to money to different agencies, including Government of India, Indian Council of Agriculture Research, state governments. There are many big donors who gave money for doing our research. This is all I wanted to say. Thank you very much. Jai Hind. हाँ जी,
हेलो।
हाँ बताओ भाई।
हाँ सर, वो सेशन तो चल रहा है ना अभी?
मेरा अब खत्म हो गया, अभी मैंने एंड कर दिया।
अच्छा, ओके सर। वो इसमें मेरे उसमें तो दिखा रहा था कि अभी जस्ट चल ही रहा है।
देख लो जरा,
अच्छा सर सेशन
देख लो अभी हो।
क्वेश्चंस देखे सर?
क्वेश्चन अभी देखता हूँ, अभी देखा नहीं है।
ओके